but first and foremost, the NBA. All quiet on the Western Front with the Spurs as we watched Oklahoma City do what the Spurs hope to do in the very near future, in mimicking the process that has taken Oklahoma City from worst to play-in to first in just a matter of 3 years.
Well, when you have a process and when you're successful at it, good things happen. And that's where we're at with the Thunder. Now, I think sometimes we look at when a team wins a playoff game or a playoff series and we make a lot out of that. And similarly when they lose one, right? We make a lot out of, oh my gosh, the Cowboys lost to the Packers, and we only live on one side of that with the Cowboys loss, or we don't pay attention to the other team. And that happens sometimes when a team wins a playoff game, right? Oh my gosh, well, they won a playoff game, whatever. They won a playoff series, and not trying to take it all away from the Thunder. But of all the series wins that we're going to see in the first round, which one is less impressive to you than a potential Thunder win over the New Orleans?
Who am I comparing again?
I would like to know if you think there is a less impressive series win out there right now possible than Oklahoma City.
Well, I think Cleveland taking care of Orlando is not difficult.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Yeah, but no, it wasn't that impressive. I agree with you.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's presuming they, they do get this done. Cool. You had a more impressive series win than, Cleveland against Orlando. But other than that, I mean, I have a hard time being willing to take them totally seriously until they take out a legitimate contender.
You're right. And I stand with you there. But they're there. And that's really all I'm looking for the Spurs, just to get there, playing where they are now. I want to be playing on April the 25th in 2 years. If we're mimicking what Oklahoma City did in 2 years, we will be playing basketball games in late April. Mm-hmm. So to get there, how did they do it? And there's one key moment, and it's the 2022 draft. They hit on 2 draft picks. They got the number 1. They got Chet. They had to wait on him for a year. But more importantly, they got Jalen Williams. And once they landed Jalen Williams, the process, as it was basically complete. Because then they had already, they had been in the desert from just before and just after the COVID period. The Westbrook years were coming to an end there in 19. Chris Paul shows up. They're just good enough to hang on for a year or two, kind of like LaMarcus did with the Spurs. Just good enough, but not enough. You're still declining, but you're still maintaining your fans' relevance. There's still hope because you've seen it, but they were on their way down. But they still hadn't begun the process. It was 2020 when the trade happened, but 2021 they get Giddey, which in hindsight, Giddey was a good guy, but I think he's more a product of great drafting and people around him than he is as far as his individual talent. But in 22, when they hit it good, and with those 2 top picks in the 12, remember in 12, they got Jalen Williams at number 12 and Chet at 2. The Spurs are probably going to have 2 top 10 draft picks this year. Unfortunately, the draft crop don't have no Jalen Williams, nor no Chet Holmgren. So the impetus right now on Brian Wright and crew is remarkable. If you're telling me you're going to mimic Oklahoma City, and that's what they're acting like up there at that pretty new rock house, well, here you go. Because the process for them ain't long. Look at how things shook out. We feel like Oklahoma City's been in this like 5-year ho-hum slow. Let's get another 1 draft pick. Like Detroit has been. No, it hadn't been the case at all. So I'm down. I'm going to mimic not what they're telling us Oklahoma City did. I'm going to mimic. They landed their centerpieces with 2 draft picks in 2012. But more importantly, it's when they went and got their anchor. When they got the deal for Shea. That's kind of where I begin this thing.
So I'm looking at a tweet, all right, from San Antonio Sports Star's very own Joe Ryan Eagle.
Oh,
All right.
uh-huh.
This was 9 hours ago. So obviously
Wow.
while watching the game. OKC is the second youngest team in the NBA. Get aggressive, Spurs. It should not take long. Okay. This is kind of on your wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
Great follow on Twitter, Ty Yeager. I'm pronouncing Yeager correctly.
You are.
The Twitter handle, the Ty Yeager, does a lot of great work for Air Alamo. Responded and said, the Thunder have been rebuilding since the 2019-20 season. And Joe right now must be sipping his morning coffee. Said they also traded for SGA to complement their prize draft pick. So I'm all for falling in line and, doing the Thunder thing, as long as we acknowledge that there's going to be some outside the building work required.
There's work to be done. What I'm saying is, if you're telling me Oklahoma City is your method, well, let's get on the same plan. And I think we're probably further down the track on this plan than maybe they want to admit, because it took getting Shea. It took getting the anchor, but it took that. I'm going to say the process began with them the moment they had the double picks. So, but it was stunted because they didn't get Chet for a year. So I'm going to move it even, a little bit more wiggle room. But I think the Spurs are, if they're telling us they have to execute, and both of these picks, and they're going to be middling picks, are going to have to be out of the park. They can't miss on either. And there's no waiting either. You got 2 years for these kids. 2 years.
I understand that, but you also can't act like this is all you've got. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't act like this is our big swing, these 2 picks.
Well, it's the only thing they can absolutely control. You're right. Though there's a lot more work to be done on the outside of the draft. The things that you really have as much control as anybody else. I mean, you got money, space, and Wemby. So that should be pretty helpful for you. But there's still other teams and other places where guys might want to be. So you can't control all of that. The one thing you can absolutely control is the draft.
I mean, I understand that you can control the draft, but you can't control anybody in it. I mean, you love to talk about Scoot. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying Scoot's a bad pick yet, but you just have no idea.
Well, you better have a damn idea. Oklahoma City hadn't whiffed. If you want to compare yourself and you want to do what they did, they did not whiff on anything.
To be that good of a drafting team?
Well, then why are you telling me you're doing what they did if you don't think you can do it? And you're right. This is the team that drafted Josh Primo with junk hanging out of his shorts. This is the guy the team that drafted the wrong Luka first.
Well,
this is the team. So
the wrong Luka, Lonnie. I mean,
Lonnie, I'll forgive. There's no. I mean, because this is the NBA.
Goalposts like this,
but no. I think if Lonnie would have landed in Oklahoma City, when Lonnie landed in San Antonio, Lonnie'd still be with Oklahoma City. It was just a bad place to land for Lonnie. Lonnie just was dealt a bad hand. It's unfortunate.
I don't know that I trust anyone to build the way that Oklahoma City built. And it's one thing to aspire to be it. So that's fine. Good for you. You have wants, wishes, goals, etc. But banking on being that is really foolish. You know what I'm saying? Like, hedge your bet. And as long as they do, I'm fine. So you can't just say we got these 2 top 10 picks, we're money. That cannot be enough.
The idea of how active things are going to be in the trade, we keep hearing from voices that matter, that the market should be busy, that there is the portal, as Wendy called it, that a lot of players are trying to jump into. So the expectation that it'll be moderately busy. With the Oklahoma City thread for just a second more, I don't know if you've seen this stat, and it is ridiculous, that this is the first time in NBA history that everybody that scored for Oklahoma City, everybody was under the age of 25. That 124 points, no matter the score, is the first time in the league's history, and let alone in a playoff game, that nobody over 25 scored for the Thunder. I don't know what that says about where the NBA is, because I can't help but hear that, and you want to applaud it. Like, my gosh, that's pretty impressive. And then you watch the halftime with TNT, which again is the best non-scripted show on TV, probably in the history of the medium, in my mind. When you hear Chuck and Shaq talk about modern NBA guys, just call them stupid. Those guys see a zone and they're stupid. Did you hear them talking about that? And it's true. I mean, they look at zones like an 8th grader looks at a 2-3 zone and go, I don't know. They're just standing around. What am I supposed to do? It's the easiest thing in the world to play against. But these same stupid kids went and got every bucket.
I guess I'm not as impressed as you are. I'm not impressed, to be clear. But
I just think I think in time we will digest what this means on a macro level. I mean, everybody under 25 scores because your team's all under 25. Of course that's the case. I mean, a couple guys didn't show up or didn't have to play tonight. I get it. No, I know what you're saying. But that it does signify a couple of things, because what I hear the same thing I hear when I hear, you got to win when you've got a cheap quarterback. When I hear everybody under 25, that payroll in Oklahoma City ain't that big.
Well, but that's true. I mean, there's truth to that. That you have to. I would modify what you said just a little bit. You said you have to win. Obviously, ideally, you would, but you have to maximize that window. Sometimes you don't win, and that's unfortunate. That's the rub of the green. You know what I mean? That's life. You lost. You ran into somebody who was better. You had the misfortune of living and existing in an era, of Jokic or whatever. And so, but you have to maximize it. And that's why the Wemby thing is frustrating if they don't ultimately, go a little bit, I don't want to say all in, but if their foot's not heavier on the gas. Because this window is very different than the next window. They're all windows, to be clear, but it's easier to work within this one than the next one. And so we're not going to tolerate or put up with excuses in the next one that aren't currently excuses, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And so Oklahoma City, I mean, we've talked about this several times over the last, couple of weeks. We don't view them to be, a top 4 team in the playoffs? Right, we'd put Minnesota ahead of them. We'd put Denver ahead of them. We'd put Boston ahead of them. Last night, notwithstanding,
I think we're getting to the edge of where I would put people in front of them.
So, at the very least, though, we can put 3 teams in front of them. Right? That fair to say? But you could also, you yesterday said you would think about the Clippers. You would think about the Mavs, and that's just in the West. I mean, in the East, maybe you could talk yourself into Milwaukee if Giannis were healthy. Again, I'm not trying to go too deep into the weeds, but my point is, even in a year where they're still ascending, they're in the mix. And that's maximizing the window.
Right.
They're probably not going to win it all this year. But the fact that they are over-delivering in the midst of this window is the goal, is the process. Like, if you think there's actually a process to be found and to be obtained and to be followed, it's this. But this process requires an obsession with, building the roster and accruing talent, whether it's by draft picks or by trade. You cannot just live with one and forfeit the other.
Eric Bishop on the Brigade Bar, always commenting, always good stuff. They've got 7 years with Wemby. Am I missing something? Why should they have to blow all their assets and cap space this summer? They don't, Eric, but I'll tell you, there's no guarantee of 7 years. I refuse to work on that premise. RJ and I sat with a guy named Dan Marino. He had 7 years.
Yeah, I mean,
there ain't no waiting. You when you are close, you go with everything you've got.
Even if you do want to live in that hypothetical, you just burned one. You just burned
there
one.
There went
right
one.
now.
That's right. Now we're down to 6.
So you just burned one, and if you don't take the second one seriously, now you're down to 5, and you have no idea what lurks and what waits and what lives around the corner amongst any of the other 5. So yeah, 7 years seems like an eternity. But you know what happened 7 years ago? 7 years ago, the
had a guy with big hands.
That too. But 7 years ago, we were coming off of the 28-3 Super Bowl. That feels like forever ago.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like and it also feels like 5 minutes ago at the same time. And if you had told Patriots fans, like, oh man, or if you had told Falcons fans, oh man, you're never going to come close again, they would have said, no way.
They're kidding me.
We were up 20. Yeah. So you just have no earthly idea what is going to happen. Each one is precious, and I respect that Oklahoma City understands that. I don't know that I want to follow them completely and totally, but I respect the way that they're willing to kind of adjust on the fly.
After last night's performance, where do you put Shea in the MVP balloting? Because there's lots of MVP chants going on. He's third.
Sure. I mean, I'm fine with that.
I mean, hey, don't go out on a limb.
I mean, I don't have like a passionate.
Because I don't think he strikes me as an MVP.
Their team is so well rounded.
Right.
I hate to penalize him for that because we hate that Wemby's gotten penalized for certain things, but they're just so well rounded that it's hard to see any kind of specific care. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen at all, but it doesn't happen commonly or frequently enough to where you're like, oh man, like, and some of that, again, it's a weird kind of crime when you're on a good team, because you look at somebody like Luka. J4's in the comment. Luka's caring of the Mavs is
right. There's such a separation. You're right.
Exactly. It's just, it doesn't happen that same way.
And that's unfortunate on the accolade side of things for Shea, because he is, top 5 in the league. There's no question about that. But you get the sense that everybody around him is also so good that if he didn't do it, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. That they'd still probably beat you. Isaiah Joe? What? That guy was on fire. So good that they sat Gordo. And because he didn't play, they set a record. First time an NBA team had all of their points scored by players under 25.